So, guys, I wanted to talk about AEW Grand Slam Australia. And definitely this year, I feel that there was definitely a massive improvement from last year. And, one of the biggest controversies of last year was that they booked a 50,000 seat arena, and then that wasn't selling well. So, they downgraded to, like, I think, like, maybe a 15,000 seat arena, like a 20,000 or 50,000 seat arena. And it became a collision special. And one of the reasons why, a bunch of people were very, very upset is because obviously, who books a 50,000 seat arena to do an episode of television? Yes, it was supposed to be a pay per view, but it got changed to a collision special. Let's not bullshit ourselves, because the WWE would not even book a 50,000 seat arena and do an episode of SmackDown, or would do a Saturday night main event. They would do an actual like big pay per view. Let's not fucking bullshit ourselves. But what happened was that they had like 12,000 people last year, and now they're down to like 7,000. And a lot of people are saying, why did this happen? And there's a couple of theories about this. Now, first of all, the big thing was how they handled Grand Slam last year, and I've talked about this before. That obviously, when you book a 50,000 seat arena, and you go down to a 12,000 seat arena, when you go from 50,000 seat arena to like maybe a 20,000 or 15,000 seat arena, people know that they're going to get a pay-per-view with the 50,000 seat one, and then because it didn't sell well, they're getting like a television episode, really. So it did feel like a bait and switch, and it did hurt a lot of trust with people. And there's nothing you can kind of say to me otherwise. It's almost like, what, I'm going to Revolution in Los Angeles. But imagine if that wasn't selling well. So they said something like, hey, you know what, it's actually going to be Sunday Night Collision. I would feel like, okay, well, I just paid $250 for a seat. I'm going to Los Angeles. It's a 5 or 6 hour flight from New Jersey. So I would feel kind of ripped off, really. So that was the biggest thing, really. The second biggest argument was that last year they had a very poor card. And what that kind of meant to me was that, they didn't put a lot of emphasis. They didn't have a lot of matches that mattered. They just put a lot of matches that were just very like spectacle matches. Like I think it was Will Ospreay was in a tag team against Takeshita and other people he wrestles well with, really. So last year they didn't have matches that were consequential. This year they did have like a few matches. You had Hangman versus Andrade, winner goes to Revolution. You had Brody King had a breakout role, really, with squashing MJF, and then Brody King versus MJF. That helps elevate him, and then that's roughly about it, really. But definitely. But they also promoted this more on television, like saying, okay, here's consequential matches, and that's the next thing that as well, really. I think this year they used a lot of storylines. They used a lot of there's a lot of consequential things, really, and that's also very important because, why should I go to a house show? Why should I kind of go to all these specials if nothing of significance is going to happen, really? Because obviously, now it's Hangman versus MJF. So MJF's going to cause Hangman some problems. The other part of it is what's Brody King's relationship with Bandito now, because they're friends, but Brody King can turn heel against Bandito, or Brody King could do something like say, hey, you know what, we're done as a tag team because I need to focus more on myself, really. Or they can become a tag team for a while. There's also like how do you look at Wheeler Yuta, because Wheeler Yuta was forced to get his head shaved by Jon Moxley. So there's a sense of like, is this going to help create a mutiny with the Death Riders against Jon Moxley, or is there going to be Wheeler Yuta versus Jon Moxley? And then there's also like Takeshita, like he lost the Continental Championship match against Jon Moxley, so there could be a rematch. There could be Don Callis yelling at him by like saying, okay, you know what, I want champions, I want winners, you're not doing it, and then Okada like rubs it in his face. And then you have one or two things. You have a rematch with Jon Moxley and Takeshita 3. Because technically, Takeshita lost because he did not. Takeshita lost because he did not get in the 20-minute duration really. So you can do a rematch, or you can do something like they say, hey, you know what? Since Okada is busting Takeshita's balls, they have Takeshita versus Okada. That could be an option as well, really. So it's good that there's things of consequence. It's good that there's storylines that are following through from the Grand Slam show. Oh, we got to watch the show. We got to be at the show because there's shit on the show that matters. And then there's been a lot of rumors online where people are talking about that they didn't do a lot of advertisement in Australia. And this has kind of been an issue with AEW is that they rush a lot of things. And I think that sometimes two things happen. They have storylines that can make a lot more sense if they put a lot more thought into it. And they can also do a lot of stuff like take a lot more risks. Like imagine if Andrade won tonight, or imagine if Brody King won, or imagine if they had Toni Storm get her head shaved. Like imagine they said, okay, here are a bunch of obvious options, but we're going to have a few results that are not that obvious. And WWE does that all the time, really. Like sometimes it's okay to say, okay, this is the most obvious thing. This is so predictable, but we're going to change a couple of things on every single card to make sure that some people are like, okay, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect that, really. So that's also kind of like a big thing as well, really, is not being so predictable. But also, like to go back to my other big thing is that I think a lot of people were talking about how it was not well advertised. And that cannot be with AEW, really, because obviously everywhere they go, they need to be about growing. Like that was kind of the biggest selling point of AEW, which is that WWE does not have it together. And AEW is going to be this company that's going to revolutionize the wrestling business. And they did that in many ways. That obviously, the big thing about them is that wrestlers have a lot more freedom. The next thing is that they're not so imprisoned by a storyline. And then the other big thing about AEW that's a big selling point is that it's TV 14, because a lot of people were sick of WWE and it's PG content, or just it's just not like we live in a very R-rated world, so we need stuff that's more R-rated. And the other selling point of AEW, which is that they have good ticket prices. Like as I said, if this was WWE, things would be way more expensive. You look at like how WrestleMania is struggling to sell because they charge people up the ass for not a lot of good. So I mean, like those are the selling points of AEW. But I think one of the big other selling points was that they were always about going bigger and better and improvement. And it's ultimately like, this is kind of like the big question for AEW. Do you care about Australia or not? Because if because really they went down like maybe like 40% really. Like they probably went down, maybe like, if I'm correct, my Scott Steiner math is correct, maybe like 35%. So, you do another 35% next year. So, then they're going to get like maybe like a 4,000 seat arena, and it's going to keep going downhill, So, they really have to be like, okay, if this Australia thing matters, we'll keep doing it every single year. And if it doesn't matter, we should just really nix it and try like maybe South Korea or another place. But ultimately, that's really, really, really bad that they lost that many people. I think this year they probably built a lot more trust because, people knew that was going to be a Saturday night special. They had matches. They had a lot of, like, as I said, they followed through. Well, they followed through with what they promised a lot more. I mean, a lot of people didn't feel that this was a bait and switch. So they just have to keep on growing, and they have to keep on just doing a great job. I think one of the bad things they're doing is that they're doing a house show tomorrow. So I think a lot of people probably, again, with AEW, the expectation is that they always go above and beyond with every show that they do. You look at how they've have a reputation for great pay-per-views. So tonight they're doing a house show, and they should not be doing house shows ever. Because I think with WWE they can afford to do that, because obviously there's such a draw to see house shows, but they have to like really knock people's socks off tonight. But they've not even advertised their Brisbane house show. So it'll be interesting to see how many people they get. It'll be interesting to see if this is going to be televised. It'll be interesting to see what matches they have. And ultimately, is this just like, fuckery for 3 or 4 hours, or other stuff that really matters, really? So I mean, like as I said, it needs to be a company of putting their best foot forward, and if they don't do that, obviously they're gonna lose. They're gonna just not do so well, really, or they're gonna find a bunch of markets and not go back there. Like look what happened with Washington State. Because people were so upset with the pay-per-view last year that people were so upset with the pay-per-view that they had last year with Bryan Danielson being betrayed, really, that they're not going back to Washington. And last time they went there after the show, I think we got like 3,000 people, so they know they probably will not do well at the Tacoma Dome unless they do an official retirement of Bryan Danielson. They put him over really strong, or they do Bryan Danielson versus Ospreay. There's ways of coming back to the Washington market, but ultimately, too, it's an example of what happens when you have a show, you have a pay-per-view, and you don't deliver, or you have results that piss people off, or you drop in quality, and then people just don't want to come back, really. So I really think that they need to salvage Australia and learn from their mistakes and just keep going bigger and better. And obviously, if advertisement is the issue, they really have to do it. And I think another thing they said with AEW is that not a lot of people watch in Australia. So they really have to tell themselves, okay, if 50,000 people or 100,000, if it's 100,000 or 50,000 or 40,000 people watching in Australia, it's not appropriate for pay-per-views. It's like obviously in the U.S., I think like usually they're around like maybe around 500,000 views now, like between 500 and 600,000 people watching. So a lot of their pay-per-views, they get like maybe between 6,000 to 6,000 to 10,000, probably maybe like I'll say like 8,000 people stateside. They usually get like 8,000 people stateside. So they know that if they do a show here, it's going to do well, really. But I know like abroad, they don't do as well, really. And they don't do as well in Australia. So like I said before, and I'll say it again, I think that they have to work harder on storylines, have to work harder on saying, okay, as I said before many times, that AEW Grand Slam Australia has to be like a part 1, and then Revolution is a part 2. You have to do things of consequential significance in Australia, and then you have to pay it off at Revolution, really. Like as I said, maybe Brody King versus Andrade. Maybe you do Brody King turning heel. Takeshita Takashita turning on Okada, Takashita versus Moxley one more time, Wheeler Yuta versus John Moxley, the Babies of Wrath versus the new Mega Bad, or like maybe Statlander says something like, what, I want to be a champion, I want one more shot, and I want to be a champion that brings my titles all over the world. Like next year, my goal is to go to Australia with a title. So there's so many things that they can do to kind of tie in stuff, and I really just hope that they understand that really it is the storytelling, and some of it are very simple stories. This happened to me, so this is how I'm going to respond, and you treat it like a chapter book. And I don't think with AEW they don't really do that with a lot of the wrestlers. And I think that, as I said, it's really, really easy. And they might need more writers. They might need somebody with Tony Khan to be the story editor and say, hey, Tony, here are all your ideas. This is how I can boost your ideas. You have the meat chuck, and you're making some burgers with it. But I'll take the meat chuck, and I'll make a New York steak or a Texas steak with it. You get what I'm trying to say. Like, you need someone to improve what they're doing, really. But overall, as I said, I think that tonight, as far as the show quality and them putting together the show with matches and consequences for some matches, that's definitely a massive improvement from last year. But advertising it more, working really hard in Australia and saying, hey, we got to make a better show. We got to look at the Nielsen ratings in Australia and other things like that. Those are the steps they need to take to make AEW really stand out. So I just hope that they care about improving in Australia. They don't look at this as, okay, we worked on our stories, we worked on our show, but that's a victory for us. No, it isn't a victory, because you went down like a little over 6,000 people, and that can't be. it should be motivation for them to do better because that's what AEW was really sold upon.